My grandmother on my mother's side was my first bully. And it's taken me years to finally say it. Because I loved my grandmother, and I still love her. She passed a year ago, but I always felt guilty for viewing her that way, despite a lot of the really negative things she would do and say to me when I was a kid. But thankfully, after my second therapy session on Friday, I was able to kind of understand my deep-seated insecurities with regard to feeling competent, feeling worthwhile, existing, being visible. And I think deep down I did know that she had a lot to do with it, but putting it into words and talking about it with someone who is not in my life was very illuminating for me. So throughout this therapy session, we talked about that sheet that I showed in my prior video, where it was that sheet that documented the different areas in my life where I do feel competent and successful and worthwhile. And we talked about how my creative outlets serve as creating some sort of legacy for me, where I feel like extensions of me are being put out into the world, and much of it has to do with compensating for the sheer amount of invisibility I've always faced my entire life. Now I'm putting pieces of myself out there in order to solidify my visibility in this world, despite my continuous urges to self-deprecate and make myself invisible by repeating the very troubling words that used to be said to me by my grandmother and by other bullies throughout my life. We talked about family dynamics. We talked about how I use humor to disguise my guilt for existing. And I do that a lot. When I self-deprecate, I do it a lot through humor. And my therapist taught me a tapping technique where you tap various pressure points and speak your insecurities aloud. And these pressure points take you through a cycle where it kind of lifts that weight from you. And it has helped me a bit, thankfully. Although I will say that my mood shifts kind of get in the way of it sometimes. But at the end of the day, this session and my reflecting on it this entire weekend just made me realize how the harmful things my grandmother used to say to me conditioned me to view myself the way I do now. To give you some context, and I'm not going to go into overly nitty-gritty details about things she used to say, but so when I was a kid, my grandmother was very envious of my other grandmother. She was envious of her because I would spend time with her because I felt safe with my other grandmother, my grandma on my dad's side. And when she discovered that, that's when my relationship with her went awry, because it spiraled into her picking me up from school every day and screaming at me for hours. She told me that I was going to die, that I was going to burn in hell, that I was a multitude of gay slurs, and she told me some other things that I don't even have the energy to repeat here because they're extremely troubling. But because of the things she used to say, I distinctly remember when I was 8 or 9 wanting to end myself for the first time. And I didn't understand what that meant when I was a child, but now that I'm older and I look back on it, I realize how troubling that was. And it's interesting because manipulative people like that, who use like emotions to manipulate you, like even today I still find ways to try to justify the way she behaved. I always try to say, well, she had a difficult life. She had her own mental health difficulties. But despite that, people still have a choice, with what they choose to do. As my grandmother got older and as I got older, our relationship improved, but those scars still remain, if that makes sense. And I'm on a journey of overcoming those, and I think that it's probably something I'm going to have to just be vigilant with overcoming the rest of my life, but I'll never forget the things she used to tell me. There were even days where she would basically make me think that she was on my side, and then she would completely shift and find some way to make me feel guilty for something that I hadn't done, or something that wasn't even a thing. There were days where I wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom because I would go to the bathroom to hide, to escape. There were days where I was publicly humiliated because she would either hit me in front of people or holler at me. She would mostly holler at me in front of people. If she ever hit me, it was just mostly like when she was babysitting me, but I can tell that there has been conditioning, because I still feel guilty even painting her in this light. But I can't just keep fooling myself or keep burying it. But anyway, I just wanted to share that. Most people don't realize that sometimes bullies aren't always at school. Sometimes bullies can be family. And my grandmother was my first bully. Anyway, share your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate you staying here and listening to me talk through my therapy process. It means a lot, and it's helping me as well to stay vigilant and accountable with my history and my insecurities and my mental health difficulties.